Welcome to the Warehouse. Have you ever heard a sermon and thought, how in the world did he discover that? Or where did he get that idea? Every week at Cornerstone Church, two teams dig into the biblical text that'll be taught during our weekend services. We spend hours talking about the text, the context, the culture of the time, you name it. But you can't stuff all that into a 30-minute message. That's where we come in. We're going to show you the stuff in the warehouse that didn't make it to the stage. Hey, Christmas is on its way. Stephanie, holiday time. What's your drink of choice around those cold holiday months?
I still like an iced coffee.
Really? So it's cold outside,
Yeah.
snow on the ground, and you're going for a drink with ice in it.
Yep. An iced latte. Yeah.
What flavor? Just vanilla?
Vanilla if I'm making it at home, for sure.
Okay.
And then Starbucks is iced shaken espresso.
Okay, whenever you make it at home, do you make it with cold brew or do you make it with just regular coffee? Just regular coffee over ice?
2 shots of espresso with ice and then iced coffee with it.
How do you make your espresso?
With my espresso machine.
Okay.
You guys are saying two different words. Me not being a coffee drinker, holla to the non-coffee people. What is the difference between espresso and espresso?
Espresso is correct.
Espresso. It's the same.
I may not say it correctly.
It's all right.
You drink, no, she
Espresso,
has.
thanks, Parker.
She puts former presso into
Yeah,
her
it
iced
used to be
coffee.
presso, and now it's not.
Now it's not
No,
presso.
it's not.
It's
Thanks,
espresso.
guys.
So-
Espresso.
So iced
No,
coffee. Do you turn your thermostat up to like 80 while you're drinking your iced coffee?
No.
No, interesting.
But I do like hot chocolate, if that counts, with lots of little tiny marshmallows.
Ooh,
Tiny marshmallows.
How
are a
many
big deal.
lots? That might be the question.
I mean, like lots, like layers of tiny marshmallows.
Yeah, how thick
Layers,
is that?
multiple.
How thick is that marshmallow layer
About 3 or 4 layers.
of marshmallow?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Ooh,
With the
great.
mini ones, I'm guessing that is 3/4 of an inch.
That's 80 tiny marshmallows she's got in her drink.
What's that in metric? I'm not sure.
That's right. Hey Siri. Nathan also back. He on a trip with official church business. Then he was sick like crazy last week, but you're
I was,
back.
but I'm
and it's
back.
good to see you.
Thank you.
And
It's good to be back.
Yeah, I hope it's good to hear you as well.
Oh,
But
thank you.
if not, warehouse at cornerstone.team. Warehouse at cornerstone.team. Nathan, what's your drink of choice during the holidays?
I would still typically just go for a black coffee. And so I like my coffee just to be a pour over. We use a Chemex, and I prefer stuff of like a Central American origin. So we typically do a Guatemala or a Honduras and grind it in the morning and put it in the Chemex, use our gooseneck kettle at 205 degrees Fahrenheit.
So you're an everyday grinder.
Yes. And and do it on a kitchen scale and everything so you get the grams exactly right.
Oh, wow.
Hold on. We got to talk about like the start of you drinking coffee. You actually had a Google spreadsheet.
I did. I kept my coffee journal in a Google spreadsheet. Talked about what temperature I used every time I brewed it and where it was from, and read books about it and stuff.
I also have a coffee journal. It says, Dear Diary, no, never. I'm a hot chocolate guy. Hot chocolate. But you ever do like a wassail or a wassail?
Yeah,
I don't even
yeah.
remember how to pronounce it. I enjoy every now and then.
We used to do that here during the Christmas season.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also once a year will make eggnog, and I really enjoy it whenever I do. So it's good.
That's all. Yeah, I haven't made eggnog in ages.
I don't think I've ever had eggnog.
Well, you should. It's good. It does have raw eggs. That's part
And
of the
a
deal.
bit of nog sometimes.
If you have some nog around, you can put it in there
And so we're going to smoothly transition
seamlessly.
Seamlessly, smoothly.
into...
I'm just thinking, hold on. Do you drink your coffee in the summer?
Yes.
What?
Okay.
When it's hot out,
Yeah.
still drinking.
Still,
hot.
yeah.
Okay.
Just as
I
silly.
see.
Just as silly.
Okay. Jay's the only normal one here, drinking cold drinks when it's hot outside and hot drinks when it's cold outside.
That's exactly right. Anyway, here we are, Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Here we are, our second week in our new series.
Third week.
Third week. That's
Third
why.
week.
That's why I tried slowing down, because
You thought
my
one was gonna
brain
save you?
stopped working. Because my notes say week 3, but I didn't trust myself.
Yeah.
This is the week of
Joy.
joy. Here we are. What a fun story it's going to be. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Nathan, did you have a big idea?
Yeah, so for me, the big idea was centered around that Jesus is the shepherd king who polarizes these powerful people.
Oh, come on.
Mm.
The shepherd king who polarizes powerful people.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie.
We are to worship the one who is reigning as king and rules as a shepherd.
Oh, again. So you guys both keyed in on the shepherd king relationship. How cool is that? Yeah, I said that the king was revealed in an unexpected place to an unexpected people.
I dig it.
Hey, thanks for that. I didn't ask for it, but hey, thanks.
Yeah.
What context do we have? So we're rolling in. We've been in the same bit of scripture over the last several weeks. What things context-wise can we relate here, specifically the start of chapter 2?
So it starts out with saying after Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem? Ham? Do we want to debate on how we say this? Is it ham or is it him?
Hem.
Him.
Bethlehem. Yeah, him.
Bethlehem.
But a lot of people do say Bethlehem.
Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention this Christmas season.
Yeah.
And just keep tally marks.
On who
On your
says it correctly
wall.
and who doesn't.
Yeah, Thanksgiving, I enjoyed my Bethlehem turkey and my Bethlehem. Hey-o.
Okay.
Nicely done.
So Matthew actually tells us little about the birth of Jesus. We see more of it in Luke 2, where he records familiar details. What Matthew tells us regards something that happened after Jesus was born in Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm. And we're not just skipping over the birth of Jesus, like we will end up spending some good, a good amount of time.
That's
That
a
would be
good
a
part
weird
to
Christmas
know.
series where we don't ever actually mention the birth of Jesus.
Although people would remember it.
Yeah.
Went
That's
to this
true.
church. They never talked about the birth of Jesus Christ.
Well, they waited till July.
Yep.
All
I
right.
like it.
Any more? You want to dive in?
Did you want to talk about the timeline before? Would that have been? Yeah. Contextually.
Sure. If it's, go for it.
No, you were the fun one with it.
Oh, wow.
Wow, he is the fun one.
No, with just this thing.
I'm not sure exactly what we're referencing. Are you thinking about like how old is Jesus when this is happening?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
okay.
we could do that part.
So yeah, we're talking about. Well, no, we can jump on verses 1 through 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." After Jesus was born. This was a fun discussion.
Yeah, so let's talk about Bethlehem. Maybe this is what you were getting at. Why? So they're in Bethlehem right now. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, but actually, whenever we look at this text, most stuff points to that Jesus was probably 6 months to a year and a half old at this point in time. So a lot of you guys, may have a nativity scene that sits on your mantle or something like that shows the shepherds and the angels and the wise men all there at Jesus' birth. And it actually seems like they were not there at his birth. All evidence points to that it was about, a year, 18 months later, whenever they showed up.
Yeah.
And
Let's talk through some of that
Go for it.
evidence as well, because we don't know for sure, because there's neither a timestamp nor Matthew coming in or Luke coming in later and saying, well, we know Jesus was potty trained and able to speak monosyllable words.
Right.
So when we're talking about the evidence that points to how old Jesus was during this time, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so there's a few specific things. So whenever it talks about Jesus' birth, it says that he was a baby, but here it refers to him later on in this passage as being a child. Yeah. It refers to him being in a house versus in a manger. we have the amount of time. So as we'll see here in actually in verse 2 there, the Magi saw the star when it rose and have come to worship him, assuming that the star rose on the day that Jesus was born and not, predating his birth. It would have taken whatever travel time for them to get there. And I think there's another main point that we had for it.
Later in the text, Herod, he wants kids 2 and under to be killed.
Yeah. So if it was just like a few weeks since Jesus had been born, then it would have been, a way playing it safe to do 2 years old. So it makes a lot more sense that he was probably, somewhere between 6 months and a year and a half old.
Yeah. Yeah. And we got to remember the Magi, the wise men, they were coming from the east, and a lot of people think it was upwards of 400 miles away. So they're not making that trip in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so Luke mentions Jesus as a baby. The Greek word there is definitely an infant. Mm-hmm. And when Matthew talks about child, it's a word that can be used as a baby, but is also a word for child. So they use two different words to mean young kids, but one is specifically an infant and one is a little more, ambiguous isn't the right word, but it's a bit more flexible in that it could be a child. And with all the other evidence, probably was an older child.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying people who have nativity scenes with wise men there, they should just throw it away?
Yeah.
They should put some shepherd's crook in their hands, take the frankincense out.
Yeah.
And
yeah. No. So that question, that brought me, like that whole discussion brought me to the question of, so Joseph and Mary were in Nazareth. Mm-hmm. And then there's the census that Matthew doesn't really talk about, but Luke talks about, that they had to travel to Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Because that's where Joseph's family was from. And they had to travel there to be registered for this census. And that's where Jesus was born, was in Bethlehem. And then you have apparently a period of something like 18 months. And then Luke talks about that they went back to Nazareth, but then also talks about that they went to Egypt somewhere in there. So there's some confusion as far as like which order. Did they go Nazareth, Bethlehem, and then back to Nazareth, but then back to Bethlehem for this, for the Magi to show up there and then go to Egypt? Or was it just Nazareth to Bethlehem and then they stayed there and like settled into a house and then went from there to Egypt and then went back to Nazareth? So anyway, there's some questions there that we don't really exactly know.
I would go more with the second, I think.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense.
Going,
probably.
Staying.
Yeah.
Then Egypt.
And then settling in Nazareth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I floated an idea that they could have gone Nazareth to Bethlehem for the birth, to Egypt and back as they were coming back home, stopped in Bethlehem again. But that one of those things where we're just talking about, well, what could have happened? What are some ideas? So what we know for sure, Luke 2:1-21 talks about Jesus's birth. Then Luke 2:22-38 talked about him being dedicated at the temple. That would have been at least 40 days later. And that had to do with the laws, the
purification.
The purification laws from the Old Testament. So in here, Matthew 2:1-12 is when the Magi visit. Matthew 2:12 is God warning the Magi not to return. 13 and 14 is an angel appearing to Joseph and saying, "Get out of town," and they went to Egypt. And then Matthew 1:16 is Herod issuing the decree about children in Bethlehem 2 and under. So it was a really fun discussion about timelines and things that in the grand scheme of things don't matter to our faith, but it's fun. It's been really fun digging into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like just giving you guys a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Some of those things, it's just like whenever you encounter something about a common story, a story that you've heard, at least every year since she became a Christian, like around Christmas time or whatever. Whenever you encounter something that you really don't know, it kind of like, it's good to be curious. And so for us, we were just curious for probably 20 minutes or something in exegesis, just like, now could it have been this? And how do we know? And what do we know? What don't we know? So it's just kind of fun.
Really, it was really fun. And one of the questions that I had was, so here was evidence that Jesus was older when the Magi visit. And again, we're talking probably a year and a half is what most would say who go with that side of things. And so I just asked the question, well, so there's some circumstantial evidence about him being a toddler. What is the evidence that he was a month and a half old versus a year and a half old? And in the room, I don't think we came up with any evidence that would say that right after his dedication is when the Magi showed up.
Right.
So, it's one of those things where we can't say for sure, but if all the evidence is pointing one way, we can say, we're pretty sure.
Yeah.
So there we are. Who are these wise men?
We got to talk about Bethlehem.
Do we?
Just a little bit.
Go for it.
Oh, we can
Okay,
talk about
so
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem is also called the house of bread. You said you found...
No, yeah, in the Hebrew...
No, not... Was it Hebrew?
No, you said Hebrew. So the Hebrew translation would be the house of bread, but the Arabic translation is house of meat. And Nathan and I had a side discussion. We would rather live in a house of bread, but we would rather
eat a house of meat. Yeah,
the house of meat.
So back to this.
Back to more Bible stuff.
Yeah, house of bread more points to Jesus than house of meat does. But this was... This was the place where David was from, which he is the king of Israel and founder of the royal dynasty. However, this was not a large town. It was actually kind of small, and it was 6 miles south of Jerusalem. So whenever we think of this town, it's not something that everything was going on here or it was a lot of traffic or anything. It was very small.
Yeah. Yeah, and the only thing that brought the only thing that brought Joseph and Mary back to Bethlehem was the census. That he's there because that's the city of his family.
And then whenever we hit Herod the king, Morgan brought up that Herod was just known for being a very, it's such an interesting character in this story. So Herod was like, he was known as a great architect for the city. He built temples and gardens and things, both for the Jews and for the Romans in the area. He would have been an Edomite or an Idumean, I think is the other name for it. So he was not a Jew. He would have been of a different lineage, but he was appointed by the Romans to be what the title they would have given him was King of the Jews. And so he ruled over them. He was known for being very insecure to the point where he ended up having his own wife killed because he was suspicious of her, having his own children killed because he was suspicious, other relatives, anybody who he thought might pose a threat to his kingdom, he would have them killed. So he's kind of acting in character in this story whenever we read through it.
Yeah, that's a bit of foreshadowing for what's to come.
Yeah, so Augustus, the Roman emperor, had said bitterly that it was safer to be Herod's pig than to be Herod's son.
Because Herod would kill his son as swiftly and easily as he would kill a pig. That's not great.
Not great.
Not great. Hey, tell us about these wise men.
I'm like, do you want to?
Yeah, the wise men would have been... there's some speculation, but they would have been studied in a lot of intellectual arts. They would have also been students of the sky. So whether think part astronomer, they know what's going on up there, part astrologer, they interpret those things to have significance in their lives and to have actual spiritual authority over them. So magician, I think of whenever you read stories of Pharaoh in Egypt, and he's got his magicians coming out to do stuff, and they're partially like his advisors and partially interpret sacred texts for him and partially like do magic tricks for him. Or whenever you have Daniel in the kingdom of Babylon and the same kind of thing, whenever the king's like, hey, call together all the magicians because I need somebody to interpret my dream for me. And Daniel was like ended up ruling over them and being the one who could actually interpret dreams through the. So anyway, think of that kind of person, not just that they're very bright or that they have lots of life experience, but that they actually there's like a magic component to it, interpreting signs and wonders in the earth as having significance.
Yeah, some scholars have pointed it back that that's how they would have known about the prophecies was because they would have been under Daniel's rule. And so they would have learned just who the Messiah would have been.
These guys in particular.
Yeah.
These Magi in particular.
This group of Magi, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So that like if you have whenever like how do they know about Jewish prophecies? If you think about Israel being deported to Babylon and with the Chaldeans, and then like it being a mixing pot for all these different cultures that they took over, that actually, as awful as it was for Israel, it was a time where their prophecies could actually be distributed. And so now all of a sudden you have all these Gentiles and these wise men who have nothing to do with the true God, who know of a prophecy about a king of the Jews who's going to be born. So pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, the only other place in the New Testament where that same word for Magi is located is in Acts chapter 13, when Paul comes across another guy they called a magician. They named him, they didn't name him. He was named, he was a Jewish false prophet named Bar Jesus. So Acts 13, verses 6 to 12. And there was this guy, the only other time that word is used in the New Testament.
So I'm going to go back. I do this to you guys all the time, but
do it.
So in the How to Study the Bible class, we just finished studying Obadiah. And through that, we got to learn about the Edomites, who are descendants of Esau. And so they migrated to the southern part of Israel, and they became known as the Edomians. So we get to actually, Herod was a part of that. So we get to see a descendant of Esau going against Israel. And so I just think it's really neat. And prophecy said that they would be completely wiped out. And we actually see that fulfilled in 70 AD when they joined the revolt with Jerusalem and for Rome. When they joined the revolt against Rome.
Against Rome.
Thank you. I'm like, against
you
Rome.
Got it.
Yes. And so it was fulfilled through Jeremiah, Numbers, Obadiah, Isaiah.
Awesome.
Sorry.
And we mentioned it. So from the east is where they came from. We mentioned a little bit, but it was 400-ish miles. So no interstates, not great gas mileage from the east to Jerusalem. But the Magi, these wise men, they came from the east to Jerusalem. King of the Jews. Jeremiah 23 was talking about God's going to raise up a righteous branch for David. Zechariah 9, again, this praise, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, shout aloud, behold, your king is coming to you. And those are just a couple places in the Old Testament that are talking about that a king is going to come and he's going to rule. Anything else for verse 2 there?
I had one more thing.
Yeah.
Just the whole Magi. There could have been one of the commentaries I read said there could have been like 100 Magi. It's not specifically 3 because of the frankincense, myrrh, and gold. So it could have been multiple. It could have been, more than 3.
Yeah, so we typically tie it to 3 because there's 3 gifts brought, and there's some stories that came after this that actually gave names to those Magi and everything, but those are extra biblical.
Yeah, so there could be a 4th guy who just forgot to bring anything, and he's standing over there just feeling great.
I hate being that guy. Like, I didn't know that this was a gifts kind of party.
Yeah, I just thought we were getting together.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, and then another thing, verse 2, who has been born, it does not say who will be born. So they know that this person has already been born, this king. And king of the Jews at that time, the Jewish people were often despised and dishonored because of their unique customs and beliefs, and also often because of their success and prosperity. They were thought often, and often thought of a low, troublesome, and conquered race. It was remarkable that they would trouble themselves so much to honor an infant king, but even more so a king of the Jews. So,
and one of the things we talked about as well is that Herod was called the king of the Jews. And so now here are these three strangers coming in from out of town and asking, hey, where is this guy this kid who's been born king of the Jews?
Yeah, it's pushing his buttons for sure. Like very triggering for him to get violent and jealous.
Yeah.
And so these guys, I mean, basically what's happening, they see a star. We don't know exactly we had and we can talk about some more later because exactly what this star was like, and how it signaled to them. Like, did it just trigger for them that there was a new star in the sky? So it reminded them of a prophecy that they should go to Jerusalem because they knew that there was a prophecy back in Numbers that Balaam prophesied that there would be a star that would rise up and a scepter in the hand of Judah. So it's possible that they're just like, oh, new star. That must mean something. Look through the prophecies. They're like, that's a Jewish prophecy. So we should go to Jerusalem, the seat of the Jews. So that's possible, but there seems to be some more going on with it whenever we get down to verse 9 and everything.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to draw some attention back at the Magi, and also that'll tie into what we'll talk about later. But Parker did mention, he said, how cool is it that people who knew the stars, and one of the things these Magi did, they would have been astrologers. They would have been, less astronomy and more astrology probably, but they knew stars. It was part of their job to study the stars. And Parker talked about how cool it is that these people who knew stars were the ones that brought this message because of what was happening in the heavens. Anything else? 1 and 2?
So just so we're tracking with I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're fine.
Just so we're tracking with the story, they see the star, they travel a very long distance, and they go to the sensible place, which is to the seat of power, because if they know that the prophecy is that there's been a king of the Jews born, then they should go talk to the current king of the Jews, because he's probably really excited about the fact that he has a new son. That's what they're thinking. And that's not what they found.
Right. So Matthew's gospel is specifically aimed at for a Jewish audience. And the first people we see worshiping Jesus is not Jewish people. So the promised Messiah is not merely just for the King of the Jews. He is the King of all people.
Boy, that's a great point that Matthew keys in on the Magi first, where Luke went shepherds.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's really interesting that we've said it, I think, every week, that Matthew geared his message toward Jewish people. And a lot of I won't say a lot, but some of the things we've read pointed to where he was writing to Greek-speaking Jewish people in Asia, maybe even in the city where they were first called Christians, and we remember it as being Antioch.
I think you said it really well earlier, Jay, in the meeting, just like the difference between Luke and Matthew. Like Luke, the doctor, puts all of this extra,
Right. Yeah. That Luke had a lot more specifics about the birth of Jesus and what was going on. And I just laughed because Luke, the physician, Luke, the doctor, he was okay with more birth related stuff. Whereas every other dad out there would be more like Matthew. Jesus was born.
Yeah.
And it happened, and it was awesome, and the kid's here, but let's not talk about anything else.
It's nasty.
It is not nasty. It is beautiful.
It can be both.
Okay.
Beautiful and traumatic.
So we see the star in Numbers, like you were saying, Numbers 24, and then isn't it also in Numbers 22 as well? And Isaiah 60:1-6, where that prophecy talks about a light to whom the nations would respond.
Not shabby.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. Ready for verse 3?
Let's do it.
Let's go verses 3-6. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.
So first word for me that really stuck out is the disturbed, troubled word right there can mean like turmoil or terrified. So you have Herod, who hears the officials in power. They've journeyed all of this way to see this baby that's born, the king of the Jews, and he's disturbed and troubled like by this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
powerful man.
Yeah, it can be translated agitated, stirred up. I kind of like that one, that he was stirred up, that he was troubled. It's a good word. Morgan noted that opposition to Jesus began immediately. Immediately after news of his birth started spreading, there was opposition to it. He was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him.
Mm-hmm.
With that phrase, one of the I had never seen this little bit of commentary before. Not only did King Herod have his wife and his sons killed and other like relatives who had a potentially claim to the throne, but one of the commentators was pointing out that he actually planned to have, on the day of his death, he had already pre-arranged to have a bunch of prominent figures throughout the city of Jerusalem killed on the same day that he died, to make sure that they did not throw a party for his death, but that everybody was mourning because someone close to them was dead.
Yeah,
it's like, how insecure is that? So whenever Herod is troubled and all Jerusalem is troubled with him, they're troubled not because he might be deposed. They are troubled because of what he might do, because he's afraid he's going to be deposed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Man, that is so good. So if you've lived your life in a way that you're not sure people are going to mourn your death, make sure they mourn around the time of your death.
Yeah, not the moral of this story, Jay.
Oh, I see. We're not going to hear that from the stage.
No.
All right.
No.
Anything else, verse 3?
I had a Spurgeon quote.
Ooh, we haven't had a Spurgeon quote on here yet.
This trouble is again testimony to the greatness of Jesus. Even as a young child, Jesus of Nazareth is so potent, a factor in the world of mind, that no sooner is he there in his utmost weakness, a newborn king, then he begins to reign. Before he mounts the throne, friends bring him presents, and his enemy compasses his death.
Boy, oh boy. Spurgeon, he was all right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys like.
I liked it.
Oh, yeah, that was super.
That was good.
Verse 4, assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. I really keyed in on that, this idea that and they're going to give a correct answer that the Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem. These chief priests, the scribes, they correctly cited this prophecy, but they couldn't or wouldn't see the ways in which Jesus was fulfilling these same Old Testament prophecies in real time in front of them. Mm-hmm. That they knew that theoretically this Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem, but as it's happening, they just didn't see it.
Yeah.
So the chief priests, they represent the high priest, and Herod would often change them due to his politicalness. And then I like politicalness. Scribes represent the Jewish law. So they were interpreters of the law of Moses. They likely debated among themselves before giving Herod their answer. So the teachers of the law, or scribes as English versions call them, were experts in the Old Testament and Corpus oral tradition. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
I always mess up words. Their work
But you said
was
it. Say it louder, so that because you said you went real quiet when you didn't. So
I want to say
confidence.
copious. Nope.
Okay.
Nope. We're just
Careful with
gonna.
that.
Okay.
The oral tradition.
There it is.
There you go.
I like it. Yep. And then you pointed to this in the exegesis, but I have it as a note. The next time the King of Jews is labeled is ascribed to Jesus in Matthew's gospel is when he is beaten and mocked before his crucifixion. And that's in 27, verse 11, 29.
So powerful.
Man, oh man. Anything else from that section? All the way to verse 6?
Through verse 6 or to verse 6?
Through.
Yeah, so verse 6 is a quotation from the Old Testament. What?
No, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's kind of a quotation.
Yeah,
it's an amalgamation of
Ooh.
several quotes from the Old Testament.
That's good.
So it's a mixture of Micah, help me out, it was 5:2, right?
Yep.
Micah 5:2. And then the piece specifically about who will shepherd my people Israel was quoted from
2 Samuel 5.
2 Samuel. Yep. So 2 Samuel is actually David's coronation as king, which is pretty neat. This is part of where my big idea came from, because I loved seeing this image of Jesus as the ruler who had come from the tribe of Judah, and would rule over his people, but he would rule over them as a shepherd, as one who cares for the flock, and as one who chases down the strays, and lays down his life for the flock. Ultimately, is the lamb who would die in their place. So I really liked this interpretation of a couple Old Testament prophecies as pointing to Jesus. And so the scribes are actually the ones who are saying that this was that this is what the Old Testament says about it, which there were actually some different translations. I think it was called I don't have my notes right here in front of me. I think it was called the Talmud. Was the some of the interpretive work that the rabbis had done on the Old Testament, and so they actually had already started to interpret some of these passages as being about a Messiah by this point. So that's why these scribes go to it. They're like, oh, yeah, we do know what you're talking about. There is a prophecy about it. The King of the Jews is supposed to come from Bethlehem.
Yeah, Morgan said it in the meeting, but he said that this is reminding the readers where King David was born and King Jesus. And it's all pointing back to the genealogy, like stated in Matthew 1.
Yeah, Matthew's reminding people a few times so far that I didn't just add that genealogy in there for kicks. There's a reason for it, and here's one of the reasons. And he's going to go back and talk about it a little bit more.
I found my note. I don't remember if I said this correctly. The Targum is the Aramaic paraphrase of the Old Testament. So just in case I said it wrong a minute ago.
I think you said TARDIS.
I would not put it past me.
I said
like that?
talcum or
Talcum
TARDIS.
powder.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I would go with TARDIS.
But it in reality, it was the, one more time,
The Targum.
Targum.
And so in the Targum, one of the ways that the rabbi interpreted Micah 5:2, they actually read it as, "From you shall come forth before me the Messiah to exercise dominion over Israel." So they actually would insert the word Messiah into this. They already understood it.
Yeah. And so
Messianic.
if somebody's wanting to look up more stuff about the Targum, well, how would you spell it?
So I actually, Targum.
Nice.
Like a mixture of tar and gum.
And sorghum. Oh.
Or just
Sorghum.
gum.
That's a good one.
Sorghum's good.
You missed it last week. I was freaking out because I said the wrong word, and then I didn't say the wrong word.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was thinking everybody was going to think I was a heretic because I said Immaculate Conception, but I was trying to say we don't support Immaculate Conception because Mary is not without sin. So it's not
There you go.
heresy.
There
You
you go.
just said
You're right.
powder.
You're right.
Instead.
I did say talcum powder.
Yeah. And Morgan and I did tell her that she didn't, but
Okay.
She doesn't put much stock in what Morgan and
I almost cried.
Wow.
Anything else through verse 6? All right, then. 7 through 9, or I tell you, dealer's choice. You want to go all the way through, or you want to break it? Let's break it. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was.
Okay, so we're just all like,
Yeah, man,
soaking it up.
What a section.
What a section. Man, what a section. So you have, Herod wants to know the time because he's trying to figure out how old this king of the Jews might be.
Mhm.
He wants to know when the star appeared. And then he goes ahead and, translates to them that they should be going to Bethlehem.
Yeah, and so that's where you would get that the order went out to kill toddlers,
Mhm.
2 years old and younger,
Mhm.
probably from the time that he ascertained from the Magi.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. And so it says, "Report to me so that I may go and worship him." We all know he is
Yeah.
not going to go worship
He's
him.
not.
Yeah, he air quoted worship something fierce.
Mhm.
Right.
They
even-
legitimately were going to worship. And
Right.
so and it's so funny, like you have these people of, incredible means and knowledge and stuff who travel a very, very long way to pay homage to King Jesus.
Mhm.
And then King Herod, who's faking worship because he actually wants to kill him.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Very
Yeah.
different responses.
And here and too, I every time I've heard this story, I think that the wise men followed the star to Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
And the story actually says that the wise men saw the star, they went to Jerusalem, and then Herod sent them to Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not something that has ever registered in my brain up until this point. It's one of those things back when we were in the Christology series, this idea that we have where we've kind of storybooked or nursery rhymed all of these stories in the Old Testament. And here I've done it to the birth of Jesus too. I think we tie that together, that here I have this idea of things from our nativity scenes that we set up, from cartoons that we watch, and we think that the star led them, like back in when the Israelites escaped Egypt, that the pillar and the cloud it went before the people. And so in my head, I thought it's the same thing that happened with the star, and we don't necessarily see that in the text.
Well, I would say kind of. So, and the star they had seen when it rose ahead of them until it stopped over.
So here they have it happening, like in verse
Right.
9, they have that it is being more directive,
Yeah.
but
But-
not necessarily to get them to Jerusalem
Right.
or from Jerusalem to Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Correct.
Once they're in Bethlehem, it leads them to the right house.
Yes. So, like, whenever I pictured this earlier when we were talking about it, I imagined them going there to Jerusalem because they assumed that, oh, okay, King of the Jews, he's totally going to be in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And then we have the King Herod, who then tells them, no, go ahead and go to Bethlehem. So I had, after hearing the king, they went on their way, and there it was, the star they had seen in the east. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. This was actually the first time that we see the star move, and it literally supernaturally led the wise men to his home.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't read verse 9 yet. My bad.
I did read verse 9.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
read verse 10. Let's push on into verse 10. So when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. So there for a time. So that's the question. When they saw the star moving, or when they saw the star again,
Right.
right. There's that kind of, we don't really know for sure, but we have what we think.
Yeah, and there's like all kinds of different interesting explanations for this star that are fun to talk about, but at the end of the day, you don't exactly know. But because they're fun to talk about, and that's part of what we do here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had read anything from like a significant astral thing happening in the sky. So legitimately, new star shows up in all the way in the sky to. If you think about like the way the angels appeared to the shepherds to announce Jesus' birth, I mean, they were, we just finished our Revelation series where the angels were imaged as stars. You know, the messengers to the church were described as stars. So it could be an angel like appearing in the form of a star, like a bright light that leads them to it. Or Jay, you found some interesting stuff about like
Saturn and
planets
Venus.
and stuff.
That it actually could be an astronomical thing that happened, which would also make cool what Parker noticed about the Magi being the ones that followed it, that there was something happening in the cosmos and something that had been set up for, eons.
Yeah.
So pardon me, it might get a little wonky and you might, lean back and say, come on. But here's an idea. So based around what's going on with Jupiter, with a star called Regulus and the planet Venus as well.
I said Saturn. I thought you talked about Saturn. My bad.
I mean, I like Saturn as well. Yeah, Saturn.
It makes my top 9 for sure.
Saturn is a top 3 for me.
Really?
I've always loved I've always loved Saturn. But
okay.
So Jupiter, it's said, and again, this is a hypothesis, Jupiter and the star Regulus become in conjunction. So Jupiter's called the king planet, and this fixed star Regulus is called the king star. And so starting in 3 BC, there might have been a conjunction with these two. So Jupiter moving around its orbit around the sun and appeared in so that would have been the first. So these two, Regulus and Jupiter, in conjunction. So that would have made it brighter. That would have caused the Magi to see this bright star and think, okay, king, holy cow, okay. And so that would have been September-ish, and then June-ish of 2 BC, so Jupiter had continued moving in its orbit around the sun and appeared in conjunction with Venus. So in Hebrew, Jupiter, the meaning of the word for Jupiter is righteousness, a term also used for the Messiah, suggested that because the planet Venus represents love and fertility, so this astronomer suggests that the astrologers would have viewed the close conjunction of Jupiter and Venus as indicating a coming new king of Israel, and Herod would have taken them seriously. Another astronomer found that around that same time noted it would have appeared as a bright beacon of light. So the discs of Jupiter and Venus, the rings, would have appeared to touch. And there hasn't been that close a conjunction since then. So after that, Jupiter would have continued to move and then stopped in an apparent retrograde motion over the town of Bethlehem. So
I don't know if it's true, but it's a cool thought.
Yeah, this might be just bunk, but man, oh man, that's just cool.
It's a neat idea.
Well, it's a really cool story.
Yeah.
And God could do it.
Oh, easy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's one of the cool things Michael mentioned when I was reading. Everybody else was kind of rolling their eyes and looking at their watches. And no, they weren't doing that. But Michael said, yeah, how cool would it be if that is true? We have zero evidence that it's true. But how cool that Jesus, who is the one who set the cosmos in motion, set it in motion. And here is the time that these astronomical things are gonna cause the Magi to say, whoa, something's going on in Israel.
He's just like, at the beginning of creation, he's like, I'm going to go ahead and put out a save the date for my birthday party.
Oh, that's good. The heavenly save the date.
Verse 11. Is that where we're at?
Let's
now?
go. So We ended at
I'm
verse 10
jumping
when
ahead. Sorry.
so she goes back and now she's jumping ahead. I'm telling you, jack of all trades over here.
Yeah.
So when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly. Just what you said, that these guys from out of town, way out of town, were the first ones to rejoice. Verse 11 and 12, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way.
Wow. Yeah, so for them bowing down, so they would only bow for those who are, when they're in the presence of one who is far superior than them, is saying, I am low and you are high. And that's exactly what these men did.
To a toddler.
Child. Yeah, a toddler, a child, a 6-month-old, just not a newborn baby.
That we can, the evidence points.
Huh?
The evidence points.
Yes.
To him not being a baby at the time.
And then, so this was a fun little thing that we got to kind of just for a second talk about in the meeting. And you said it really well, Nathan. But we noticed here that the child is mentioned before the mother. And so Michael asked, like, is this something that Matthew was trying to do? Is it really something that's custom? Because I got that from a commentary and I was trying to dig into it more. And then you responded really well.
Thank you. Yeah. So we were just partially talking about, like it would have been customary to mention the mother first, like in their hierarchy, it would have been, the husband and then the wife and then the child. And so one of the things that the Bible often does is subjects that, or subverts that hierarchy. And so it was partially like, is it a pattern? Is Matthew doing it intentionally? And we were trying to figure it out. But the thing that seemed clear to us was that regardless of whether he's doing that intentionally, Mary and Joseph and these other people in this story are side characters, and the main character is Jesus. As they, so Mary is identified as Jesus' mother. It's not that Jesus is Mary's son, and so everybody is identified by their relationship to Jesus because he's the hero of the story.
So good.
Man, that's great. You have anything for that part, Stephanie?
Them bowing. Nope. I have stuff for the golden thing.
Yeah. Talk about,
I just, how cool it is again. So verse 11, they saw the child, they fell down and worshiped him. These astrologers from the east, around 400 miles they came, but they came prepared to give gifts to a king, but they saw him and they fell down and worshiped him. So they knew that this was more than just an earthly king. Even there, they worshipped him.
And again, with Matthew's focus on this being to Jews, and the Jews' major problem being that they missed the Messiah who is right in front of their eyes, he's setting up the entire rest of his gospel to tell these stories of people who missed Jesus, even though he was right in front of their eyes, and to prove to them that he was the Messiah, the king from the line of David who had been promised. And so this is just another example of Herod and all these scribes and chief priests miss the king of the Jews, and these pagans, they get it right.
Yeah, saw and beheld, fell and worshipped, and then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts. What about these gifts?
Yeah, so this was a custom that was done in the ancient East, like to bring gifts. So they brought gold, which gold symbolically can mean royalty. Throughout Scripture, whether these wise men realized it or not, gold is associated with royalty. Kings, queens, princesses. For example, when we see Solomon's wealth described in 1 Kings 10, gold is mentioned no less than 10 times in 7 verses. This association with gold with royalty is found elsewhere in the Old Testament, and we see that in Psalms, in 2 Kings, and it fits one of the main thrusts of Matthew's gospel, namely to show Jesus' kingship. Matthew made clear that Jesus deserves royal honor in chapter 1, and now Jesus is receiving it in chapter 2. Frankincense is a sign of worship, and it's used in a ceremony. It emphasizes Jesus's deity. In the Old Testament, not only was it royal processions, but also various offerings to God. It was stored in the chamber of the sanctuary in Nehemiah 13:5. When it is used in the Old Testament, frankincense usually refers to something related to the worship or service of God. And then myrrh, we talked about this, but Smyrna.
Yeah.
She can't think of myrrh without thinking of Smyrna.
Yeah, which it points to Jesus's humanity. So it was basically a perfume with many different purposes. Where frankincense would have been associated with worship of God, myrrh was more associated with anointing of man. This is quite fascinating, particularly in light of other appearances of myrrh in the Gospels. Jesus was presented myrrh as a king in a cradle. However, in Mark 15:23, when Jesus was being hoisted onto the cross, Mark tells us that they offered him wine mixed with myrrh. So not only was Jesus presented with myrrh as a king in a cradle, he would be offered myrrh as king on a cross. John 19:38-42 tells us Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea used myrrh to prepare Jesus' body for the burial in the tomb. In this gift of myrrh, given soon after Jesus' birth, we have a foretaste of his impending death. He came for one reason. Jesus was born to die. He came to take the payment and penalty of sins on himself. And this shouldn't be a surprise for Matthew, as he already told us in the angel's announcement that he has came to save his people from their sins. So
Nice.
that was a lot. Sorry, guys.
No, that's cool. Frankincense is a white resin or a gum obtained from a tree by making incisions in the bark and allowing frankincense to flow out of it. Again, like you said, highly fragrant when burned and therefore used in worship. Myrrh obtained from a tree in the same way. So almost like getting some sap for some marvelous maple syrup, that it's kind of the same way that you tap the tree to get frankincense and myrrh.
Interesting.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I hadn't thought about this, and it seems a little bit obvious, but one of the commentaries I read mentioned that these gifts, while symbolic and like very honorary to Jesus, they also would have been very practical, as here before very long, the family has to get out of Dodge and get down to Egypt. And so to provide some financial means for them, having this could have been very practical as well.
Yeah. So you're saying that Mary just didn't keep the gold on Jesus' shelf as he grew up?
Yeah.
Like his bronze shoes?
Likely not.
Ah.
Like his bronze shoes.
Yeah.
From Revelation? Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you're talking about? Like the burnished...
I so wish it was.
Oh, I thought you were talking about him with burnished bronze on his feet.
That would have been such a good pull.
But that is
clever.
I mean, you should just go with it and say that's what you meant.
Yeah. Listener, you're going to remember me making that connection.
Oh, goodness.
Man, oh man. All right.
And then they get warned in a dream.
Yes, yes.
And then, so the Magi, get warned in a dream not to return to Herod, because in case they didn't know how murderous he was.
Very murdery.
He's super murdery.
Yeah. He murders the people.
So warned not to return, so they went another way back home.
Yeah, and this is another way that of worship shown here is because they're obedient, and they leave.
Ooh, yeah. Keep going. I'm sorry, that was me saying, way to go. Good point.
No, that was, mainly it. Yeah, so being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed to their own country in another way. So they were obedient. After
meeting this toddler, worship him and start doing the things that the messengers from this toddler start doing, saying. Man, oh man. Anything else?
Still like to picture Jesus walking.
As a toddler?
Yep.
He's toddling around with people worshiping him.
Yep.
Worshiping him.
Yeah.
Oh, man. What? So here's the thing. We haven't really talked about this. This week's subject is joy. Our theme is joy. How does this bit of scripture, how does this text today, how does it bring joy up for you guys?
So I key in specifically to the way the wise men reacted whenever they saw the star, and then consequently saw Jesus after that. They responded with, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy.
Yeah.
Like that's just such a superlative way of saying that they are so happy and overcome with joy. And so I see that as just like what happens whenever we really understand who King Jesus is, whenever we come to worship him. Like that should be our attitude, whether it's on a Sunday morning, in our quiet time, in like the normal everyday stuff. Like we should experience great joy because of who Christ is.
And you drew like verses 10 and 11, you don't see a very long time in between them. So when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. You kind of drew that distinction in our meeting.
Yeah, it seemed that way to me.
Yeah, they saw the star and they said, "Oh, let's go!"
Yeah,
and got in there. That was fun. That they saw this is where we're going. Let's get in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Stephanie, how about joy in this section?
Yeah, mine was kind of similar to Nathan. But when you rightly see Jesus as who he is, as King and as Savior and as Shepherd, that's all you can do is worship.
Yeah.
But if you don't see him, Morgan kind of tied this in, but if you don't see him as you rightly should, you're going to see him as a threat.
Oh, yeah. Man, yeah, we get the first opposition to Jesus, and we get some of the first worship of him. Just, man, all out worship, giving of themselves, falling down, and then doing what he said, just like you talked about. Oh, so good.
How about you, Jay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, man, oh man, I think part of what excites me is what Parker keyed on early is these guys whose business is the stars, having the star lead them to the Savior, and how Jesus works that in us. That, man, just like the Revelation series, that Jesus is here among the churches, and he knows his church, and he knows everything that we need, everything we are, everything we will be. He knows it, and he's here for us. And using that to spur these wise men, these Magi, to worship, just kind of, it hits me in a way that I need to pay close attention to the things in my life to see where Jesus is working in them.
It's good.
And, well, you guys excited to hear anything else about this?
I'm excited to hear it all together.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I think one of the things that I hope happens is that we hear this message and we realize, as I've realized, that we do storybook scripture a lot because we get a story that we have read or have heard about so much that we assume what's in it and we don't dig into it. And I pray that this is a message that shakes us out of that and gets people back into the Bible to see what God's really saying through it.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, guys. Very cool. Hey, we are always on the lookout for some feedback, whether you want to challenge Nathan on which Central American roast
Please
he
do.
needs to be trying.
I'll find
and
it.
What temperature specifically, because that was part of your spreadsheet.
Yes.
What temperature that to test out.
It's pretty agreed upon.
It is pretty agreed upon. I mean,
You wouldn't know.
he says.
Yeah, I was like,
But if you want to
wouldn't-
reach out again from that, or you got some cool star talk you want to talk about, again, email us, warehouse@cornerstone.team, TEAM, warehouse@cornerstone.team.
Team is the word you had to spell?
he spells it every time.
Every time, because .com, .net, these are the things
Okay.
we think about, but
Okay.
they're here in .team.
What about warehouse versus like men's warehouse, which is
It's the same word.
No,
Warehouse.
men's warehouse
Oh, it's
is spelled
WEA.
Yeah.
No, this is a warehouse like you would store things in.
Yeah.
And that's WAREHOUSE.
Yeah.
At is a little @ sign.
Yeah.
Cornerstone, if you don't know how to spell cornerstone by now,
find another church.
No.
I'm kidding.
He's
Stay
kidding.
here. We
He's
love
kidding.
you.
Yeah, we really do. Also, whatever platform you're listening on, please, hey, go rate us and talk about,
As long as it's good.
yeah.
Share it, please.
Or if you, again, want to talk about what Thanksgiving food you want
Yeah.
and what your favorite movie is, yeah, do that.
Please.
Please. And as always, you can check us out, cornerstonechurch.community. Guys, we'll see you next time. Say bye, Nathan.
Bye.
Bye.